Hello everyone, welcome to another special episode of Meticulous Talks Extra. I am, of course, Cursedchords, and it being Sunday after our previous stream and the last Sunday before pre-release, I have, surprise, surprise, a couple more spoilers to talk about today. Who'd have thought? And before I get to them, as per usual, I'm just going to take a moment to step back and look at everything that has happened for FriendsForever in the past week, because there was actually a lot. Obviously, over the course of last weekend, we were all kind of still processing those big ultra rares that got dumped on Friday of that week, Friday of the previous week, that is. And then over the course of that week, we had Ocellus, we had a few more changeling things happen. And then there was the UR dumps that happened over the course of the week. We had Meadowbrook. We had a whole bunch of cards last Friday, culminating in Mistmane, of course. So yeah, things have developed a lot over the course of the week. And so similar to how in my last video, I had a slide that was all about these new archetypes that I see developing. Just take another one here to take a step back. In this case, I've got kind of these grouped together into categories as opposed to full archetypes, collapsed all of Gallus down into just a clump of Gallus decks, and the unicorns down to a clump of unicorn decks. And we've got white there, clearly doing interesting things with Ocellus. Not sure exactly what that deck looks like yet, or what those decks. I think there's plenty of things you can do with her, but there you go. Heard plenty of rumblings about pink. Somnambula is a great card, Cadence is a great card, Silverstream is a great card. Sure, do that. We've had lots of good things happen in blue and yellow. With Cloud Chaser Fitter, with Meadowbrook, with Flash Magnus again. Not sure exactly what the final decks are going to look like, but I would be very surprised if there's not something there. And as to the dragons, Dragon Control is still good. Last Friday we had Ember, new card. Maybe you haven't seen it yet, but she's a hint of possibly something other than control. Honestly, she's not a particularly good control card. Right as she is, Diligent isn't a particularly great thing to see in a control deck, and except for plus some power counters on it, can't be frightened. That's okay. But Ember, I think, is a hint of some kind of dragon mid-range potentially existing out there. So dragons are now a clump rather than a particular deck. And on the outside there, I've got this kind of potential cloud of cards that look either goodish, or in the case of Fireworks, I've heard intense speculation about them. And these are cards that I'm starting to get a little bit more nervous about. Maybe they won't make it into real decks. But as I said last week with Apple Bloom, I think she only needs like especially a pink Earth Pony card that's great, and I'll move her over right away. I think she's really, really close. But anyway, this is currently where my sort of conception of the FriendsForever meta is currently sitting. And clearly, before the big review stream, we're going to have to go through and cull this down and try to figure out which maybe 4 or 5 decks I think are actually going to be the good ones. Because otherwise, you can't rate everything a 5, right? There's got to be some ones in there. And some of those ones are probably on this page right now, I would expect. Okay, so anyway, next up is to get into the spoilers themselves. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. So let's get to it. First one here is Caldera, Explosive Personality, an orange-purple dragon, 3s across the board. Main phase, pay 1 and exhaust this card to frighten a friend and our Harmony Dragon tag. When this card readies, interesting that, you may put a +1 power counter on a dragon friend. So, another card that is a little bit of an in-between. Being able to pay 1 to frighten a friend, that is good in control, it's good in mid-range, it's kind of good all over the place, really. Pay 1 to frighten something on the other side of the board. That's just good, generally speaking. You can only do it once per turn, obviously. And then when this card readies, which is a novel trigger, I don't believe, I'd have to go look back through all the old archives, but I don't think there certainly aren't very many things that trigger on a ready as opposed to on an exhaust. When the card readies, you get to put a +1 power counter on a dragon friend. So very similar to Ember. Indeed, you might be thinking of Ember right away, because I did just spend a little time talking about her. Works with her very well, but again, putting +1 power counters on things when it stops them from being frightened, okay, that's fine in a control deck. It's still not like the best thing ever though. So again, Caldera might be another hint towards that dragon mid-range deck. But anyway, let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. So the first thing I want to talk about is this frighten thing. Being able to just pay 1, exhaust this card to frighten a friend is kind of sitting in the middle between Luna over there, which was just exhaust the card to frighten a friend, and Stick over there, which was exhaust the card, pay 1, start the face-off. If you win, frighten the friend. And so Caldera is kind of in the middle between those, where it's not free, but technically there's less risk than the whole face-off thing. And I know everyone's going to say there's no actual risk. When was the last time a Stick face-off got lost? I'm sure it has happened, but it doesn't happen very often. But the interesting thing is that Stick is in a little bit of a spot where I think some decks are going to start questioning whether it gets whether they want to use it as much. Funnily enough, I mean that's great for the card, because the thing about Staff is it really exists on this continuum where on one end, you imagine like a number line here. On one end, there are decks that like Staff mostly for its +3 power. We're talking aggro decks. We're talking stuff like Bugle's friendless thing that only needed the Stick to allow Rarity to confront stuff, that kind of thing. And then on the other end, you've got decks that like Staff more for its ability to frighten things. This is most of your traditional control-y type decks that don't really care as much about the +3 power. They're more about being able to use it to frighten stuff every turn. And so in those kind of decks, Caldera might be viewed as kind of a better option of sorts. Just kind of cut out the middleman and pay 1 to frighten the thing without having to go through the whole face-off, especially because in FriendsForever, you're going to have to worry about Gallus and Smolder, 2 mains that you really want to think twice before you start a face-off with them. With Gallus, you're taking the risk that your opponent's going to play something and score a point. With Smolder, you're taking the risk, well, you know you're going to have to discard something, and if you don't have any good discards around, i.e. you all have high power cards, there's a reasonable chance that you actually don't win the face-off, and you just spend 1 AT to discard a card, really. So in a world where Gallus and Smolder are around all over the place, then those decks that like Staff more for its ability to frighten stuff might consider using Caldera instead. And notably enough, since Caldera is only purple and orange, the purple-orange dragon control deck prefers Staff mostly for its ability to frighten stuff, and so they might consider using that instead. So there's that to consider. The other thing is this whole +1 power counter thing. I did a search through dragons, and all of them basically back through core. And so there's some orange ones, and there's some purple ones, and then there's some blue ones, obviously Ember and a bunch of spikes and torch. And in the context of control, the only one that I actually thought, yes, I would love putting +1 power counters on this card is ultra rare blue Ember here, because putting a +1 power counter on her is basically the same thing as putting it on all your troublemakers, and so that kind of fits the whole dragon thing. All the other ones, excuse me again, don't get any better at control when they've got +1 power counters on them. As I mentioned, though, just 2 days ago on Friday, we got our new SR Ember, who at least gives you something to say to that. Okay, well now Caldera lets me spread these power counters around, and every turn another one of my dragons is going to be unfrightenable. Probably you would start with Ember herself, so that you can keep working it that way. And it's worth noting, of course, that both of them are not other. They count everything. Caldera can put a counter on himself to stop himself from being frightened, and Ember can put a counter on, or rather, Ember can have a counter put on her, and she can't be frightened. So it's all good. That's an interesting line. It would kind of work for a control deck to have those cards out, and now every turn you're just moving things around and putting a counter over there, putting a counter over there, and slowly fortifying your position so that none of your friends can be frightened anymore. And that's okay, I guess. It's not bad. Don't know if it's necessarily something that the deck loves, really, more than anything else, right? 2x Reign of Terror is obviously a card, and will be a valuable card in decks that are playing against some plus power troublemaker control deck. So maybe it's okay, maybe it's not. I don't know. But yeah, that's essentially Caldera as from what I've been able to see. Another hint of this possible Dragon midrange deck out there somewhere. I'm not sure what that deck looks like, but it's probably going to have a little bit more blue in it. Most of the aggressive dragons are blue. Caldera does have a place in Dragon Control, I think, maybe, but it's definitely not as essential as some of the other cards we've seen so far. And it's possible that he even has a spot outside of dragons entirely. You give up the +1 power counters, but you still have that pay 1 to exhaust this card and frighten a friend. And like I say, in a world with Gallus and Smolder, maybe that's good enough if that's what you want. It's just be frightening stuff. So that's Caldera. That's spoiler number 1. Spoiler number 2 is Starlight Glimmer, Great and Powerful Assistant. Another 3/3/3 across the board. Purple and white unicorn with our beloved Harmony Unicorn tag. When this or another one of your unicorn friends enters play, choose an event in your discard pile. Till the end of the turn, you may play that event as though in your hand. If you do, banish it. The usual purple-white get stuff out of your discard pile thing that we've seen on Philly Moondancer before. And what's old is new again, and similar type effects. And so this card was one that whenever you see, well, these days whenever you see a Harmony Unicorn, especially Harmony Unicorn in purple and or white, there are a bunch of decks that you naturally think of. In my case, first time I saw this card, I saw Unicorn, I saw playing events in the discard pile, just like Moondancer. And so naturally I assumed control. Just like the way that Moondancer had seen play before, and the ability to get cards back out of discard pile and essentially do the F-stop thing to the extent that it was required in the match. But the funny thing is, the more that I thought about it, and I am biased, honestly, in this because I think Unicorn aggro is just so cool. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought maybe that's what this card is actually going to be good for. In this purple-white Unicorn aggro deck that does the big event chains and similar. Yeah, we actually have seen a couple of events that both are Harmony Unicorn events and could potentially go in this kind of deck. So that's kind of what I was thinking on in this Unicorn aggro type thing. Suppose we've got, this is just kind of going to be a sample turn of like some of the tricks that you can do with it. Suppose she's already in play, and then we play our Trixie. Trixie gives us a discount on our detention, so we're at 1, and then we play that for free. Suppose that at some point in the turn we moved our Trixie Smoke and Mirrors from one problem to the other, and then you get to confront, and then you play your Reliving History, an event that we saw just 2 days ago. Has a neat little aggro trick in it where you can use it to have a friend at one problem and then send it back to the other problem for free, or rather for a cost of 1. And then, so that's one turn, relatively straightforward. And then the thing is, on your next turn, presumably you did a DFO or something, and then now you got ready to go again. The thing about Starlight is, say we portal her, and then she gives us the ability to pull an event out of our discard pile. We can pull the reliving history that we played last turn back out if we want to, do something similar with Trixie or etc., right? These key, big, tricky events like reliving history, like say Samilo, can get pulled out, and you can start doing some crazy things. Like, say for example, instead of if I just say I portal this card and I also copy it with a Magic Instructor, so now I've portaled 2 unicorns, which gives me 2 events to pick out of my discard pile, and also like a double discount from Trixie, so I can pull out like a 2-cost Samilo, and then I can pull out another event, and things kind of start going crazy once you start including Magic Instructor and discounts and this, and you get triggers happening all over the place, and you can do some really, really cool things, which has always been what I really love about the Unicorn aggro deck. Just so many ways to have a handful of events and throw them down and pull them out of your discard pile now, etc., etc. So those are all possible ideas right there. The other thing that I mentioned, speaking of control, you naturally run the comparison against 4/4 Moondancer over there. And it's a little bit hard to evaluate, really. For one thing, Starlight can potentially have more than one event active, which is useful for when you're not entirely sure what your opponent's going to be doing, and you want to have options available to you. She's easier to get into play, clearly. That's always been Moondancer's biggest fault, really, is that 4/4 rec is so demanding for any kind of deck to get to. Starlight at 3/3 is much more accessible. Her big problem in a control deck is that she only triggers when something enters play. Like Moondancer, just every turn you can just choose that, and etc., etc. Whereas with Starlight, happens when she plays, and then in order to keep getting these triggers and keep being able to do stuff, you have to keep playing unicorns. And in a control deck, you usually eventually reach a point where you don't really want to keep playing stuff. You want to have a circulation of events in your hand, basically. And so the necessity that you have to keep having your unicorns enter play to get these triggers isn't all that great in a control deck. I mean, sure, you can portal your own unicorns if you want, but you want to be using those portals to mess up the opponent, basically. It's probably not worth it to just keep cycling them like that. So, in summary again, Starlight is another unicorn who I think goes great in the purple-white unicorn aggro deck, has potentially a spot in control. I think she's actually great in unicorn aggro because she gives you a greater effective event count. The purple-white version of that deck has to spend some time on entry, has to spend some time on getting its colors arranged. It has a lot more friends in it than the mono purple or even mono white that I've started to consider lately versions of that deck do. And so being able to effectively increase your event count by being able to play them more than once is actually really good. And the third thing that's worth keeping in mind is one of the things that I notice as I look at every unicorn and say, oh, that could go in the aggro deck. Well, there's only so many event spots, and so we'll see if, this card does allow you to do some cool, crazy things, but is it good enough to make the cut? Well, we'll see once that deck comes out. So, those are the 2 spoilers I've got. Don't have anything else for you. There's more coming tonight, I'm sure. 2 more streams. Drata is obviously streaming, and Commentaries Magic is streaming, and they're going to have to follow up Mistmane and Meadowbrook and all them too. So expect some good stuff tonight. But in any event, these are my cards, and hope you enjoy. And pre-release coming up on next weekend, which means that soon enough we're going to have the whole list of the set, and we'll be able to see what exactly is going to be happening. And of course, these cards plus every other card that's explicitly dropped as a spoiler, we're going to be talking about them on the Real Meticulous Talks a week from now, Sunday, December 9th. So come on down and talk to us then. I'm probably going to be actually on the stream that time as well, so appreciate that. In the meantime, appreciated having these spoilers, appreciated being able to talk with them about you, and I'll see you later.